Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here to talk about the Farm to School and Early Childhood Vision Grant. Applications are currently open, so this is a meeting to provide a little more information and create space for folks to ask questions. Let's do intros. Again, I'm Gina Clitheroe. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Farm to Institution Program Manager at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I've been in this role for about 3 years now, so I may be a familiar face to many of you. Most of my work is in administering these state-funded grant programs, of which the Vision Grant is one of those. And I'm here with my wonderful colleague, Lily.
Yeah. Hi, folks. I'm Lily Bradburn, they, them pronouns. I am a grants and contract specialist at the Agency of Agricultural Development Division, and I support Farm to School as well as the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. I am sort of the technical, all things web grants support for Farm to School. If you've worked with Farm to School previously, Diana Ferguson was in this position, and I started in about October. And yeah, excited to help support folks in this application process.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lily. All right, so let's dive in here. See if I can navigate the slides. All right, so welcome everyone again. So we are using a Microsoft webinar for this, and I'm sharing the PowerPoint live. So depending on whether you're joining via your desktop or browser, hopefully there might be some arrows at the bottom here so you can navigate through the slides on your own. But if you have any challenges seeing the slides or anything, let me know. You're automatically, with this webinar feature, you're automatically muted when you enter the room. But if you raise your hand, then I will be able to unmute you. You have to request to be unmuted. But the chat is wide open, so if any questions come up throughout the meeting, please drop them into the chat. And just a flag that the session is currently being recorded and will be posted to the grant webpage and sent out to everyone who registered for this webinar. All right, let's dive in. So an agenda for what we're going to cover today. We're going to walk through just an overview of the Farm to School program at the Agency of Ag, and then a little more specifics about the Vision Grant. We're going to talk about the details of the grant opportunity itself. And then Lily is going to take over for a tutorial for how to apply for a grant in web grants. That'll be especially useful for folks that haven't applied for a grant in web grants before or haven't been in the system for a while. And then our goal is to save 15 to 20 minutes towards the end or at the end for questions because, yeah, that's a really important usage of our time today. Excuse me. Okay. So at a high level, the Vermont Farm to School and Early Childhood Grants Program, this is a state-funded grant program that was authorized in 2006 with the passage of the Rozo-McLaughlin Farm to School Act. The intent of the program, as described in statute, is to execute, administer, and award local grants for the purpose of helping Vermont schools develop farm-to-school programs that will sustain relationships with local farms and producers, enrich the educational experience of students, improve the health of Vermont children, and enhance Vermont's agricultural economy. So each year, the agency makes grant awards to fulfill this purpose set out by the state legislature. And I've highlighted here a couple facts and figures from our most recent impact report, which I can drop a link to in the chat for folks that are interested in learning more about the program in general. But just want to note that there are 2 grants that are available this year for the Farm to School and Early Childhood Grant Program. One of those is the Capacity Building Grant, which was available in October. That has since closed, and those grant projects are getting started right now. And then the Vision Grant, which is currently open. And our programs adapt each year. And so we're authorized by the legislature to have grants available. And then each year we kind of adjust what those grants will look like based on what we're hearing in the community, what we're seeing as needs coming up. So just wanted to offer that background and a little sneak peek of the report that was just published in February for folks that might want to dig a little deeper. Okay, to the Vision Grant. So the purpose of the Farm to School in Early Childhood Vision Grant, or it's abbreviated a lot on our website and in our materials as FTSEC, as Farm to School in Early Childhood. The purpose is to expand Farm to School and early childhood programming in Vermont by amplifying innovative work in individual school communities, strengthening farm to school support systems, and reaching underserved school and early childhood communities. Strong proposals for this grant will improve child nutrition, enhance educational experiences, and connect youth with the land, local farms, and their local community. This grant has a total of available funding of $275,000. And the min-max award ranges from $10,000 to $60,000 per grant. I guess just one more thing to note is that the Vermont State Legislature appropriates $500,000, has appropriated $500,000 each year to this grant program. So a little more than half of it is going to be administered through this grant program this year. And again, it's state grant funding, just naming that, as I know there's a lot of federal funding concern at this moment in time. This program is safe. This is a state-funded grant program. And the deadline to apply is Thursday, April 10th at 2 p.m. So a little bit on the grant program history. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but this Vision Grant, as I mentioned before, the agency kind of adjusts what our offerings are each year. In 2021 was the first year that the Vision Grant was offered, and it was really meant to support these innovative and outside the box projects that could support farm to school growing throughout the state. It was really focused on creative approaches that could be either scaled up or replicated to impact multiple communities. And so with our budget grew substantially between 2022 and 2023, but in 2021 we had one grant, 2022 we had one grant, and then when the state legislative appropriation more than doubled in the fiscal year 2023, we were able to support 5 vision grants, which was really exciting. These are like little sneak peeks of what some of those projects were. And these projects, some of them are wrapped up, but some are still underway. In 2024, we were able to support 6 vision grants. And these are some of the other types of creative, innovative, outside the box solutions to farm to school related challenges that our partners across the state brought forward, and we were excited to fund. Happy to answer any questions about these types of projects as we keep going, but I just think sometimes it can be helpful to see examples of what the program has funded. Noting that also the program has changed a little bit this year, so we'll get into that in a minute. This is consistent from prior years of the Vision Grant. If folks have applied or looked into this before, eligible applicants are early child care providers, after-school programs, schools, school districts, and nonprofits are also eligible to apply. This is the only farm to school grant that nonprofits can apply for, but nonprofits need to demonstrate partnership with schools, childcare providers, or other organizations in the Farm to School and Early Childhood Network that focus on serving kids. So this is where the change has happened between last year of the Vision Grant and this year of the Vision Grant. We really expanded the types of eligible projects that are allowed for this program. Last year, like I said, we were really focused on, and prior years of this grant, really focused on amplifying innovative approaches to farm to school, whether by supporting scalable or replicable projects. This year, we are still focused on that, but we're also thinking more broadly about how we can grow farm to school across the state. And so we added these two additional kind of like project types. One is strengthening farm to school and early childhood support systems, which are supporting larger scale efforts that are going to benefit multiple schools or early childhood programs and help them develop or expand their farm to school programming. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we also wanted to create a funding opportunity that could support reaching underserved communities in the way that we're defining that for the purpose of this grant. I know that's kind of a confusing term, but for the purpose of this grant, we're talking about either communities that experience food security challenges that farm to school programs could support addressing those challenges, or those that have not participated in the Farm to School and Early Childhood Grant Program in the last 4 years. So those are, and our idea here is that we want to think about like, what are those really exciting pilot projects that we could scale up? What are like some of those systems of support that can help grow farm to school across the state? And then it felt like there was this missing gap of like, how do we reach folks that we're not already reaching with farm to school grant funding? And so we created this like third category, which is reaching underserved communities. So that could be a school or early childhood program that's located in an area that's experiencing food security, or just in a community that hasn't really engaged with farm to school support systems like this grant program before, and trying to bring new folks into the fold and help get this state grant funding distributed, equally, equitably across the state. All right. So
Tina, just a quick
yeah,
question from the chat. Is there a place where folks can find the list of organizations in the Vermont Farm to School and Early Childhood Network?
good question. I don't know that it exists, but what I can say, I don't know, Lily, if you'd be able to drop into the chat the link to vermontfarmtoschool.org. So that's the network's website. And there are ways to get involved on that page. So if you're not already kind of connected with organizations that are involved, by signing up, by joining one of the meetings that's on the calendar, that's a great way to kind of plug in to the network. Is that helpful in addressing that question, Lily? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Okay, great. Wonderful. All right. So funding priorities. The funding priorities for this grant look very similar to the funding priorities for the whole grant program, which is enriching the educational experiences of Vermont youth, increasing school or early childhood procurement of local food, improving child nutrition, increasing student participation in federal child nutrition programs, and developing and strengthening connections between schools and their local communities. As part of the application process, folks will need to choose one or more of these funding priorities and describe how their project aligns and would support these funding priorities for the program. For allowable costs and budget, eligible project costs include but are not limited to food, local food specifically, as defined by Act 129 of 2020. The link to that would be on the website and the request for applications. Gardening supplies, cooking equipment, stipends for, community engagement, farmer engagement, student engagement, all of that good stuff. Travel is eligible, and for both travel and personnel, they just have to be really directly related to the project for any of these really. Also want to name that indirect costs are allowable as part of the grant request, and there's no matching requirement for this grant. And the award range is 10,000 to 60,000 again. This is just a little preview of what the budget grid will look like when you go in to apply for this grant opportunity. These are kind of the categories, and matching funds are listed in here as if applicable. So if the cost of doing your project is greater than the funding that you're asking for, then we would ask you to write in where that additional funding is coming from, and what that amount is to calculate a total project cost. Okay, I am seeing a couple other questions coming in the chat too, Lily.
Yeah, the first is could it cover educational training?
Yes. Yes, it could.
And then the second is an example of an indirect cost.
An example of an indirect cost. So indirect costs are oh, I wish I had like a definition that was like totally 100% accurate in the back of my head, but in general, the way that I would describe them are kind of like the costs of doing business. Wait, that's not quite it. It's like fixed costs of having an organization that's doing a thing. So for example, if you're applying for a grant to do some sort of programming, indirect costs are kind of like the background administrative costs that are associated that make it possible for you to do the project, but are not directly related to the project. That's why they're called indirect. So for like larger grants, folks might request, it used to be like the standard was 10% was the de minimis indirect cost rate. And now the federal rate just bumped up from 10% to 15%. And that's why that's reflected here. But oftentimes basically it's like you don't have to give an explanation as to what those indirect costs are going to. Those are just indirect costs that are going to supporting your organization so that you're able to do the project. So that might be like paying for rent for a building to be doing your programming in, or paying for like the finance office who's got to be managing this paperwork and submitting these claims, but their work is not directly related to the project goals. Yeah, overhead. Thank you. I'm not sure who that wrote that in the chat, but yes, overhead. Exactly. That's a great way to describe it. Great. Okay, I'm gonna keep going now. One thing I wanted to name when you prepare your application is that we ask folks to kind of define a community problem. And these might be challenges related to climate change, farm viability, food security, health and nutrition. And then as part of your application process, you'll be gathering some qualitative or quantitative evidence to demonstrate that this is a problem impacting your community. And then as part of your project proposal, and to demonstrate the need and purpose for these funds in your community, is to answer this question of like, how does this farm to school project going to impact this larger issue? We know that farm to school is a topic that connects to community, it connects to health, it connects to agricultural viability, student learning. There's so many kind of like interconnected components, and we just want an applicant to really draw out how farm to school is going to be of benefit to their community. And then we also want to know how this farm to school project is going to impact the youth in their learning and empowerment around engaging with these community issues. So that's a unique kind of quality to this grant and how you'll define your project. All right, I'm looking at the time and I've got to kind of speed through the next few slides here. Great, so just these are the different components of the application. You'll see this when you get into web grants. It's pretty straightforward, but just wanted to give an overview of what the components of the application are. Before you prepare your application or before you get into web grants to start submitting your application, there are a few things that you'll need. So part of this application is you're required to have partnership with other organizations. For example, like if you're a school, then having your organization listed as like a key organizational partner. For every school that's involved in this project, as well as any nonprofit organization, you're required to upload a letter of support from the organizational leadership of that organization, whether it's a school or a other nonprofit. All right, I'm seeing a hand up from Shira. Let me see if I can unmute you, Shira. Allow mic. Okay, so now I think you have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I just want to clarify. So if I'm going to help my child's Shaftesbury Elementary School apply, they should, we need to like partner with the school PTO or like some other organization, or that's not, it's only required if you're a nonprofit, not a school to.
Good question. Good question. I guess there are maybe a couple different components here. So if you're applying on behalf of the school, your school would be listed as like one of the organizations that's part of the project. And so we would need a letter of support from like your principal or superintendent or somebody else like in the organizational leadership type role. And then and I'm gonna actually need to like double check this within the application itself, but I believe if it's not an eligibility requirement, then it is like a competitiveness requirement, is that because this project is really focused on building those community connections, that having at least one other organization involved in your application will strengthen it. I don't actually think that it's required. I'm gonna have to double check on that, Shira.
Okay. No, I'm glad I asked then. And then what about, can I type part 2 of this?
Yeah.
What about like partnering with a farm that's not, farms aren't, or like, they're not NGOs, they're businesses.
Yeah.
That would help, but isn't a requirement, but that would help. Is that
Totally. And that could be instead of a nonprofit, you could be partnering with a farm. That could be like a community member that you're partnering with. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Really good questions. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. So those are letter of support is required from any organization that's going to be part of the project. Oh, I see another hand up. All right, Donna, I'm going to allow your mic and then you've got to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm like in the middle of making lunch at the same time. So I'm a home daycare provider, and I'm wondering if some of the funds, when you're talking about the relation to farms, could be a CSA account, like, and also things like building your own garden and raised garden beds.
Yes. Yeah, those would be totally eligible costs, Donna. And yeah, similar to what I just shared with Shira too, is that for you to fill out that organizational partners section of the application, you'll want to put in your childcare as like an organization that's involved, upload a letter of support from leadership, which might be you if you are.
Right, I'm a sole provider. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to write your own letter of support. But
I could, another idea maybe is that I'm involved with a network that has a leader. I don't know if that,
yeah,
would count for somebody helping write up, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that would be great to list the network as like another organizational partner and then
Okay.
upload that letter as
Okay.
well. Yeah, great idea.
Okay. I guess my only other question is when we're applying, like, what if we don't spend, like, I am a small program and I know things are very expensive nowadays, but what if I don't, when I complete my project, it doesn't equal, like the amount that I'm awarded?
Mm. Yeah, so in your grant agreement, if you were to be awarded, then we distribute the funds on like a payment schedule, so you don't receive the whole grant at the
Okay.
beginning. So for example, like if you spent like 90% of your grant, but you didn't spend the last 10%, and otherwise the project has like gone as planned,
Hmm.
then we would just for your last payment, we would not give you that full, we'd only
Okay.
give you what you spent.
Okay.
Or in the case where we overpay, like say you only spent 50% of your grant and your project is done, then we would ask you for a refund for funds that weren't spent.
Okay. And then as far as I've done a few grants for my program in the past, and it is required to, on tax purposes, to list it as income. It's taxable income. Is that the case with this grant?
I'm not, it's hard. It's a hard question for me to answer, Donna. It's not consistent across like business type and how people categorize their expenses. So I
Okay.
don't know. Unfortunately, we don't have like a blanket answer to that
Okay.
question. Yeah, but it
Okay.
would be something that, yeah, you could talk to your tax preparer about.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the great questions. I
Gina,
see.
I'm noticing the time. I'm wondering
Oh,
if folks have other questions. We
true.
are going to have about 15 minutes, but I think we want to get through just the rest of our slides. So folks either want to like put those in the chat and then we can come to them at the end if you want to make sure that it's captured. Maybe
Cool.
do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Lily.
Yeah.
Yes, please. We're gonna have a little Q&A at the end. I'm just gonna breeze through these last ones. So required attachment, get those letters of support ready before you go in. You'll fill out this Act 154 water quality requirement. Once you get into web grants, you actually don't need to prepare that in advance. It's a pretty simple form to sign. But another thing that'll strengthen your application, but is totally optional, is to include some attachments showing that demonstrate the problem that we talked about earlier, like the community problem that your project seeks to address. And then also, it's also optional to upload resumes for individuals on your project team. And then after grants are awarded, just note that getting a certificate of insurance listing the Agency of Ag as additional insured is a requirement for all state grants, including this one. And we'll also be requesting a W-9, just like to give that information up front since the paperwork can be challenging for some folks to obtain. So want to make it clear and transparent at the beginning. Application review. So applications again are due April 10th at 2 p.m. After those come through, the agency has a review committee that will review these and score these based on the criteria that's in the request for applications. So if you, as you're preparing your application, highly encourage you to review the request for applications in great detail and especially pay attention to the scoring criteria, which kind of shows how applications will end up being scored by reviewers. Payment schedule. So the payment will be released, the grant will be released in 3 payments, 40% at the very beginning, which is kind of like a cash advance. And then the second payment for the second 40% will be released at that midway point through your project after you submit your first interim report. And then the final grant payment is also kind of like is more of a reimbursement based payment, and that one comes at the very end of the grant with the last 20% of the award. The link to apply, I'll drop it in the chat. And now we are going to, I'm going to let go of my control of the screen so that Lily can give you a little web grants tutorial. Oh, there's the stop sharing button. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. Okay. Gina, can you see the login page?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to go through quickly with folks some of the beginning processes for both getting registered in web grants and then also navigating to the application itself and just pointing out some helpful tips and guidelines. So if you refer to the RFA, which is on the Farm to School website, there is a link to getting to this registration or this login page. If you would like to make an account and you don't have one, you can click this yellow click to register page. Everything that you see with red text and an asterisk, you're going to want to fill that out. And one thing that I will say is, so you can fill this out with your information. And then something that's helpful to think about when it comes to organization information is that you want to think about who is the financially responsible entity for this grant application. So for instance, if you are a school that's within a supervisory union, you'd want to think about the actual supervisory union, you know, who has the authority to sort of sign off on receiving these grant funds. If you're partnering on behalf of a school, obviously you'd want to have the school being the representative organization. So this is just a helpful first step in when you're filling out your registration. And so you'll go through and you can select, go through, fill out these options, obviously do the CAPTCHA to say you're not a robot, and you'll save the registration information. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get two emails. The first is going to have your username that it's pre-selected in web grants, and then the second is going to be a temporary password. So you'll get that in two emails. So you want to look for a web grants email. And then if you currently have an account, but say it's been a while, you can always use this forgot user ID or reset password links, and that will take you through the steps to log in. So once you've logged in, if it's your first time logging in, what I'd recommend is you'll be getting a temporary password, but I would navigate to changing your password. So when you first log in, you kind of come to this main page that says work assignment. And this is just the main starting point that web grants logged you into. If you go to my profile, you can go here and you can edit my profile. You can also reset password. So this will give you options if you need to update your information or you'd like to change that temporary password. And then it'll also list your associated organization. So the organization that you chose when you were registering, that's going to be listed here. So then to navigate to the application itself, what you're going to want to do is in this left sidebar, you're going to go to funding opportunities. So when you select funding opportunities, this will actually show all currently posted agency, the Agricultural Development Division funding opportunities. So you'll see multiple, but what you're going to want to look for is the FY25 Farm to School Vision Grant. And you'll see it's posted, and so you can click on that. And this brings you sort of to the cover page of the Vision Grant. It'll give you some information, like it says the posted date and Gina's contact information. And then there's a little bit more of that RFA language that's posted into here as well. So if you have any questions, you can refer to here. It also gives you some links to both the RFA and then some links to the web grants application guide, which this kind of runs through all the different information you could need sort of from a technical standpoint of how you would apply to an application within web grants. And then, and it looks, yeah, there we go. There's the tab. It looks like this. And then it also will bring you directly to the grant webpage for the Vision Grant. So What you'll want to do to start a new application is that you're going to hit this green button, start new application. And what it brings you to is just a general information page. So you're going to put in here your application title. I would suggest as a starting point, it's good to put in what you think the project title for this will be, because when reviewers are looking at the application, this will be the title that comes up. So, you know, as opposed to putting like Farm to School Vision Grant 25, I would put some identifying title specific to your project that you're applying to. So you can put that in, and then the primary contact. So this is the main person who is really going to manage filling out this application and manage the grant. You can select yourself. And then what you'll want to go and do is you'll save the form information. It will also ask you, this is a test account, so it doesn't ask here, but it'll ask for your organization. So you'll hit the drop down button and you'll want to select the organization for which you're applying for. And if your account is attached with that organization, it will show up. There's also this additional contacts. This is anybody who you would like to also have access to the grant application and then later on access to the grant itself. So you'll save this form information and oh, there it goes, it comes up. So it comes up with your application title. It says that you're editing it. And then again, you'll select your organization that you want to have, and then you can select additional contacts if you would like. And so you can go through here. I could put myself. And then you would save that. So at this point, it brings you to the main application page. So this is where all the information that you'll need to fill out is located, is this main application components page. There's a big scary red bar right here that says the application can't be submitted currently. Don't worry, that's because you've just started the application. But what you'll want to do is that you're going to be navigating through this application details page. Some tips that I want to point out in terms of navigating web grants is that you want to make sure that you're utilizing the buttons and tabs within web grants itself. Don't necessarily rely on browser tabs like the back buttons up here or the refresh page. It's not always a one-to-one, and sometimes it might mess up your work. So if you ever need to go back, you can just hit back. And there are tabs in each application component page that you can select through to navigate. So the first part of this application that you're going to go through is our global application form. So as Jean had said earlier, this is just a general application form. It is attached with every funding opportunity that we offer. And you'll go through, and again, anything with red text and an asterisk, that's going to be a required question. So you'll go through and you'll just put in some general contact information, grant request, and again, the applicant business organization information. And so again, I just want to reiterate, you'll want to think about what is the main organization who's going to hold the financial responsibility should you be awarded a grant. It's helpful to start that early on because if it has to get changed later on in the process, it's a little bit of back and forth just to get that fixed. So again, you kind of want to think of, you know, if you are applying with a specific organization or a small school within a supervisory union, but there's actually a larger entity that's responsible for maintaining things like grant awards, you'll want to make sure that that's who is named as the organization. So whenever you're filling out something in web grants and you're filling out a form, you just hit save form and then it'll just save the information. So if you're in the midst of something but you haven't finished the form quite yet, you can just hit save information. And then what it'll do is it'll show what you've completed so far from that section. And then in order to make sure that you've sort of checked off that everything is set with that and what you wanted in that part of the application is all set, you want to hit mark as complete. If you haven't filled out all the necessary requirements, this is where it'll give a warning sign. So it'll say to you, these are the specific parts of the application you haven't quite filled out yet, but it's still saved. So if you need to, you know, put in some information and then leave it for later, you can do. And then you can always go back by hitting edit form. So that's the main sort of general application. I will note too, the last part is a voluntary demographic information. This is helpful for the agency and just gathering general demographics. But again, it's completely voluntary and it is anonymous. And there's a forms link from Office that you can select and fill out. So then there's a couple of different ways that you can get to other parts of the application. You can see here at the top, there's sort of these abbreviations for all the different sections of the application. You can hit App List, which again brings you back to this really long application details page. Or if you were to say, click on this project team and project partners, you can also scroll all the way down. Oh, it doesn't for this one right now because I didn't save anything. Here we go. If you save it, you'll see there's a previous and a next button. So that will also just take you to the next part in the grant application. And then again, as I said, if you were like, I clicked something, but that wasn't necessarily the right place to be, you can always hit the back button. It might give you something of, leave, but we haven't actually filled anything in. And then again, like I said, there are these tabs at the top. So a couple of different ways to navigate through the application. I always tend to go to the application list because it's nice just to see sort of a uniform section of all of the pieces of the application. And I just want to point out a few places where there's some interesting components to the application, just give a little bit more context. So you'll see here that we have what is called a multi-list. And this is where you're listing all of your organizational partners, and then also the project team where you're listing everybody who's going to be playing a support role for the project. When you first come onto this page, as I had just done, it had just save forms. So you'll want to select save form in this location. And what'll come up now is you see here, it says add rows. So this allows you to actually input information into this table. So and just go put in some test information. And then whenever you come to one of these upload sections, you'll hit select file and it will show you your documents folders, and then you can select whatever kind of document it's asking for and then save it. And once you've saved information in one of these multi-lists, it now comes up as a row of information. And then what you can do from there is if you want to edit that information all at once, you can hit edit all rows. And then you can see it comes up then as a grid where you can fill in all that information. So this is just one of those unique ones where there's a little bit of extra steps in putting in this information. And so that'll be for the organization partners and the project team, where you'll have to add rows of information. And then the other place that I want to point out is towards the end. So Gina mentioned that one of the requirements for documentation is a water quality certification. So when you go to the last tab of the application, there is this section where you need to make sure that you are in state water quality compliance. So you'll select yes or no, and then there is a form here. And what I want to point out that's a little funky is that you don't want to just select this link because it actually brings up the PDF and it will kick you out of web grants. What you actually want to do is right click and open it in a new tab, and then you can download, and this is the PDF of that good standing certification. So you'll fill that out. And then again, as I said before, you can select file and then upload that file into web grants. And then you can go ahead and save that form. And then this is also what that budget table looked like. As Gina was mentioning, that was just a snapshot. And so this is what it looks like in web grants. So it's already set up for you to be able to fill out as a large grid with all of the places for requirements if you need to list grant funds requested and then matching funds. And then I will also note that the description is required. If you aren't going to be requesting, say, travel, you're not going to request any funds for travel. You'll just want to put NA. That's one that sometimes throws people off. So each of these description boxes, you'll want to make sure that you put some text. If it's just NA for a bunch of them, that's okay. And then the rest you can actually put in your narrative descriptions. So then what you want to make sure you go through is you filled out all the components of the application you feel that you need to fill out. You mark each of those components as completed. And then when you come back to this application details page, you'll get a green check mark that says complete. And again, it'll trigger a warning window if there is a piece that you are still missing when you're in that section of the application. So you can go back through and fix that. And then once you have all green check marks for each of these sections, you'll have this change to a green bar and it'll say your application is in compliance and ready for submit. And there'll be a submission button that you can select. And one thing I might recommend, if you're going through this application and you'd like to fill this out on a separate, Word document, Google, Sheets, whatever, definitely feel free to do that. And then when you go to, say, copy and paste that text, just double check any asterisks, quotation marks. They don't always transfer into web grants. And so just make sure those edits are made. So lots of folks have, kind of completed the questions outside of web grants and then gone and copied in, but you just want to make sure that you double check that the formatting hasn't gone too funky. And yeah, I think I will leave it there and give people time for questions.
Yeah. That was so helpful, Lily. Thank you so much. I see a question from Shira.
Thanks so much. That was really helpful. So do you want to see, maybe you said this and I didn't see it, but do you want to see these events happen and finish in a year? Or like, I have this, so
2 years. It's a 2-year program. Yeah.
Okay. And then let's say you involve multiple organizations. So I know of like 3 or 4 events that happen weekly or some are annually between the PTO at Shaftesbury School and the local library that they're giving crap food to the kids. And we can implement farm to school food for those. Now, if it's multiple organizations, who's going to be would we say the PTO at Shaftesbury is going to take on distributing the money to the other organizations, or?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Shira. I think I feel like generally PTOs don't have I guess maybe PTO might not actually be an eligible applicant. So it would have to be an eligible applicant that would be the one that applies.
Why wouldn't PTO be an eligible applicant?
Because the eligible applicants are schools, early childhood programs, and nonprofit organizations.
But PTO is a nonprofit associated with the school. I'm just trying to, I guess, so Shaftesbury School, you basically have to go through the supervisory union, you're saying. I was trying to avoid that.
Gotcha. Yeah. If the PTO, is the PTO like a nonprofit organization that has like the ability to receive grants? Like, are they a fiscal?
All you need is your 501c3, right?
I think so.
If you think it's more appealing to go through the supervisory union, I totally can ask about that. But that feels like that just feels like a bigger challenge if I'm only trying for one school.
Yeah. When we have schools apply, generally it will be that the school applies, but the supervisory union needs to be ready for those. Yeah, sign off, submit that letter of support, and be ready to actually be the fiscal recipient of those funds.
And I just don't think they would want to do that for the library. So I'm just wondering, while it is encouraged for multiple, do you see are you willing to distribute the money to 2 different places or no? Or 4 different places? You can involve the museum. I can do all these things, but then you're burdening. Yeah. And I put it in the budget, the supervisory union is willing to distribute to 4 places, but that's a cost. Like, okay, we're putting in another $5,000 for that overhead cost. Is that, I think they're going to say no, but I would ask.
Yeah, I would say maybe either works. I feel like we are used to seeing like funding go to the supervisory union, but we have in some situations had like a nonprofit associated with the school end up being the fiscal agent for a school project. So it wouldn't be totally out of line for the PTO to be that organization that applies for the funds and manages them. As long as that the PTO is like capable of doing so.
Yeah, they're definitely a 501c3. So I don't
Okay.
see why. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I just want to name there are a number of questions that came in the chat and I responded to them there, but yeah, if anyone has any, for example, someone had asked, when will the awards be announced? So the award after applicants will learn of their application status in early May. Folks asked about insurance requirements. I responded there. Any other questions in the last couple minutes here?
I'm not mute. If they ask me if it's for 2 years and I get pushed back because, okay, you've implemented this program for 2 years and now the 2 years are up, and where will we find funding after that? Can you reapply, or this is a one-time thing?
Good question. At this point in time, there's no like requirement that could say that you couldn't reapply again. So
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, part of the application does ask as well about project sustainability. So in terms of like competitiveness of the application, there might be there will be questions that ask about like, what's your plan for sustaining this project after the grant ends? And there are some additional kind of like points associated with applications that have a plan around that.
Yeah, that's a hard one, but
yeah. It's one of the things about the grant world. All right. Any last questions? We've got 2 minutes left. I think one question that hopefully folks have had a chance to, ask your questions in the chat, if not coming off of mute. One question I got over email that I just wanted to share is somebody wrote in and said, am I ineligible because my organization has received a farm to school grant in the last 4 years? And I confirmed with them that no, that was like maybe a little bit of confusion around like the eligible project types versus eligible applicants. All schools, early childhood programs, and nonprofits that are working with schools, early childhood programs, and the Farm to School Network are eligible, regardless of how many grants you've received in the past. It's just that certain project type around reaching underserved communities is meant for folks that have not received a grant or are in like an area that's challenged by food security. So I just wanted to offer that clarification in case there was confusion from others on that question too. I thought it was a good one. Okay. Well, we have arrived at noon. Thank you all so much for your time. I look forward to seeing your applications come in by Thursday, April 10th at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. It's a funny time, so keep that in your mind. It's not midnight, 2 p.m. All right. Thanks all. Reach out with any other questions. Thank you so much, Lily, for co-presenting.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Take care, everyone.